How chemistry quietly replaced human judgment. It didn't feel like surrender. There was no moment of decision, no clear handover. Judgment simply faded, replaced by reactions that seemed more reliable than people ever were. At the beginning, nothing about the shift felt dramatic. No authority announced that human decision-making was no longer sufficient. No declaration stripped people of responsibility. Instead, trust moved gradually, almost imperceptibly, from human discretion to chemical certainty. What once required interpretation began responding automatically. What once demanded experience now followed signals. For most of history, human judgment sat at the center of decision-making. Experience accumulated slowly, shaped by trial, error, and memory. Intuition filled the gaps where data was incomplete. Caution acted as a brake when outcomes were uncertain. Chemistry played a supporting role, offering tools, measurements, and explanations, but rarely authority. People decided. Chemistry assisted. That balance endured for centuries. That balance has quietly changed. To understand why this matters today, we need to examine when trust shifts from people to processes. As chemistry became more precise and more predictable, it began outperforming human intuition in narrow tasks. Reactions delivered consistent outcomes where judgment wavered. Measurements replaced estimates. Signals replaced interpretation. Decisions that once depended on context could now be triggered by thresholds. At first, this shift felt like progress. Fewer errors occurred. Results arrived faster. Bias appeared reduced. Chemistry removed uncertainty from decisions once shaped by emotion, habit, or tradition. The reaction worked every time. That reliability was persuasive. When consistency improves outcomes, questioning the method feels unnecessary. Slowly, chemistry stopped advising judgment and started replacing it. Systems were redesigned so that reactions initiated actions automatically. If a chemical indicator crossed a line, the response followed immediately. If it remained within bounds, activity continued without debate. Judgment moved from the center to the periphery, from decision-making to supervision. This change happened quietly because it worked. Outcomes improved in measurable ways. Efficiency rose. Variability decreased. Accountability shifted subtly from individuals to systems. When chemistry decided, responsibility felt distributed, diluted across protocols and instruments. Decisions no longer belong to a person. They belong to a process. This is where the story truly begins. With chemistry stepping into a role it was never explicitly given. Not just shaping outcomes, but shaping decisions themselves. And once judgment leaves the loop, reactions gain influence far beyond the laboratory. As chemistry assumed a greater role, decision-making became increasingly automated. Thresholds replaced discretion. Instead of asking whether conditions were acceptable, systems checked whether measurements met criteria. If they did, action followed. Human involvement narrowed to maintenance and oversight. At first, this reduced error significantly. Reactions responded faster than people could. Systems adjusted in real time. Chemistry excelled at consistency, and consistency was rewarded. Trust migrated quietly from experience to measurement, from wisdom to repeatability. But chemistry measures only what it is designed to detect. Everything else becomes invisible. Context fades. Nuance disappears. Decisions optimized for chemical signals ignore human complexity. Values that cannot be quantified fall outside the system. This is where early tension emerged. Situations that required interpretation were reduced to reaction outcomes. If chemistry signaled acceptable conditions, caution was dismissed. If it flagged risk, activity halted, even when judgment suggested flexibility. Edge cases exposed the limits of automation. Over time, people stopped questioning the process. Deference replaced oversight. Chemistry became authority rather than advisor. Responsibility diffused so thoroughly that accountability became difficult to locate. When outcomes failed, no one had technically made the wrong choice. The system had simply followed protocol. What made this shift especially dangerous was its subtlety. No one consciously surrendered judgment. It eroded gradually as chemistry proved reliable again and again. Each success justified another layer of automation. Each removed decision felt rational. Judgment did not disappear overnight. It withered from disuse. Chemistry had not demanded control. It had earned trust so completely that judgment stepped aside willingly. The conflict emerged when chemistry encountered situations it was never designed to judge: unusual conditions, ambiguous data, human behavior that did not align with predefined thresholds. The reactions still functioned correctly, but the outcomes felt wrong. Systems optimized for chemical certainty struggled with ambiguity. When measurements conflicted, there was no intuition to bridge the gap. Chemistry could signal discrepancies, but it could not weigh consequences. Decisions stalled or cascaded in unintended ways because no one was empowered to interpret the signal. This buildup carried emotional weight because failures no longer felt human. No one had made a poor judgment. No one had chosen recklessly. The chemistry had simply done what it was instructed to do. When harm occurred, responsibility dissolved into process, leaving frustration without accountability. Experts reviewing these events noticed a troubling pattern. Judgment had not disappeared because it was unreliable. It disappeared because it was slower, harder to standardize, and difficult to defend quantitatively. Chemistry offered clarity, but at the cost of wisdom shaped by experience. Attempts to reinsert judgment faced resistance. Manual overrides were viewed as liabilities. Human discretion was treated as noise rather than insight. Systems built to trust reactions over reasoning resisted reinterpretation. Convenience had hardened into structure. This marked the emotional peak. The realization that chemistry, while precise, cannot understand meaning. It cannot assess values. It cannot decide what matters when trade-offs collide. Precision had replaced discernment. By replacing judgment entirely, systems gained speed but lost depth. Chemistry became decisive but not thoughtful. Efficiency improved, but wisdom thinned. And that imbalance was becoming visible in outcomes that felt technically correct yet fundamentally misaligned. The climax arrives with a quiet but unsettling realization. Chemistry never replaced human judgment. Humans stepped away from it. Reactions did exactly what they were designed to do. They measured, compared, responded. What they never did was understand why a decision mattered. That responsibility was quietly abandoned in the pursuit of certainty and speed. This insight reframes the problem. The failure was not automation, but abdication. Chemistry became decisive because it was allowed to operate without interpretation. Judgment was not removed by force, but by convenience. The resolution lies in reintegration rather than rejection. Chemistry excels at detection, speed, and consistency. Humans excel at context, values, and meaning. When the two operate together, decisions regain depth instead of speed alone. Modern systems are beginning to reflect this lesson. Human oversight returns at critical thresholds. Chemistry informs, but does not dictate. Protocols include space for interpretation. Responsibility is reclaimed rather than dispersed. This story is not about rejecting chemical authority. It is about remembering its limits. Reactions can guide action, but they cannot choose values. That choice always belongs to people. When judgment and chemistry work together, progress becomes deliberate instead of automatic. And in a world increasingly shaped by reactions, that balance may matter more than any breakthrough.